My question was just about Solomon and his concubines and his multiple wives. I was just wondering if that was something that was allowed back then, or when did it become, I guess, not allowed?
Unallowed. Okay. Your thoughts, Derald?
Yeah, well, we have to go to the law first mentioned regarding marriage. And the Bible says in Genesis that God brought the woman to Adam and the two should become one flesh. So that's what we call the law of first mention. It was one man, one woman, not one man and multiple women, or one woman and multiple men, or multiple partners or anything like that. And even Jesus in Matthew 19, he talks about divorce, I believe it is, there in 19. And he talks about, he says, in the beginning, God made them male and female. And what God has joined together, let no man separate, of course. And this is how God is designed for marriage. Was Solomon and others permitted to have multiple wives and so forth? Well, the Bible says when God permits something, it doesn't mean it's if people are allowed to do things, doesn't mean that God is authorizing it. We just read about their lives, how they're living. We see really God's grace and mercy upon their lives, as Solomon had all these wives and concubines and so forth. But we know the results thereof, which is the nation went into idolatry because with all these women, he brought in their various religious beliefs, and it became a great compromise. And then you have the nation divided, north and south. And then you have ultimately the north is taken over by the Assyrians, and then the south is taken over by the Babylonians. And Israel's booed out of the land because they have defied the living God, the one and only true God. They're worshiping all these other gods. They've engaged in all kinds of immoralities, and it's a big, big mess. So we see that ultimately they would be judged for their sins. And sometimes we read things in the Bible, in the Old Testament, other places where we read, oh, that's wrong. And yet, why is God allowing it? Well, he allows man to make choices. The Bible says, we reap what we sow. If you sow to the flesh, you reap corruption. If you sow the spirit, you reap everlasting life. So this is God was not into polygamy at all, having multiple wives or multiple husbands, whatever you want to call it. And this is his ultimate design. So that's what happens. Now, there are laws for divorce and so forth. The Bible does talk about that, and we understand those things. But you're asking about polygamy, so we'll just stay there. Mike?
Yeah, and one of the things we find that where the Bible doesn't outright condemn it, when we go to first occurrence in the Bible, as you mentioned, Derald, that's God's ideal. That's God's best. Now, we remember during the times of Israel, when the wars would kill so many men, there wasn't enough men to go around for the women to have children and all. So these are what some of the reasons why Bible theologians believe this is why God permitted it and allowed it. Now, in the New Testament, if you're going to be a pastor or in the leadership, you're to be the husband of one wife. This is addressing the Old Testament criteria for the priest not being a polygamist. It was that was outlined there where Paul wrote to Timothy. But as we really look at it, God's best was, and Jesus reiterated it, that it was between a man and a woman and not women. So I hope that helps.